Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters Podcast. I'm your host, Liz Lang, and I'm here with Dr. Mark Burton. In this podcast, we will talk about all things mental health. Thank you so much for joining us. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Dr. Mark Burton, and this week we're going to talk about the Holiday Survival Guide because it's the most stressful time of the year.
Very well done, Liz. I like that. Good job.
I'll extend my career on Broadway.
We could make a whole song of that. But I believe that it is the most, I'm not going to sing, it is the most stressful time of the year. It's a very stressful time of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, and which I have been feeling the last couple of weeks. I mean, and like just with fall activities going on, and like we haven't even hit Thanksgiving and Christmas yet, and I'm already feeling like just the strain of all of extra stuff popping up. I mean, just around Halloween, and I'm in school, and so parent-teacher conference, it's that time of year too.
Oh, yeah. I think it's good to acknowledge at the start of this that there's certainly other traditions that go on this time of year.
Yes.
That make it busy too. Hanukkah's starting, two of my grandchildren are Jewish, and Hanukkah's starting fairly soon. Now, they love it because they get both Hanukkah and Christmas. So for them, it's, I think it can be stressful for parents. And then there's certainly other traditions that happen. I think, which is an interesting thing about the end of the year, and I believe it's all about the winter solstice, and that's where the tradition starts from. And so, a lot goes on for many, many people.
Right.
It's a time for family. It's a time, it's often cold. I mean, depending on where you live, but it's a season of gathering and parties and connection. And I think we're going to talk about it. That's what makes it sometimes very stressful.
Yes. And, most people, I think, have very positive feelings about the holidays. Most people love the holidays. But there are some people, and it's not because they're a Scrooge, and it's not because they hate Christmas or they hate holidays. It's just because it's stressful, or it could be from a negative childhood experience. And so maybe we start off with that right off the bat of, don't judge somebody because they don't love the holiday season, because you don't know why they don't love the holiday season, right? I mean, there could be all sorts of valid reasons for them to really not like this time of the year.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's easy for us to assume, the Scrooge model, but I don't know that that's true, because I have certainly treated clients. So, for instance, where the parents, I don't know why they would even think this is a good idea, told them that they were getting a divorce right before the holidays.
Ugh.
So,
yeah.
And I think they do it because, okay, school ends, they're out, and they think, okay, we'll be all together and it'll be good. But it forever changes the way they feel about the holidays.
Yeah.
Because they've linked this really, for the kids anyway, it can be a traumatic event with something that's supposed to be fun. So they don't like it. The other thing, sadly, death happens at that time of year. And I think that if a parent dies or a sibling dies around that time of year, that then changes the way you feel about it. So you're right. We shouldn't judge, how people react to the holidays. We should have empathy. That's a big thing, right? Have empathy for others' experience in life.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I'm just going to throw it out there. Don't judge people because they've already got their Christmas lights up.
Lindy's wanted me to put Thanksgiving lights up, so I haven't done that yet.
Wait, what are Thanksgiving lights?
Well, we have the lights that are installed, the permanent lights.
Oh, okay.
So you can change them. And we have Valentine's lights, we have 4th of July lights, we had Halloween lights.
Okay.
And so now, you can choose a preset program. But yes, there are actually people in my neighborhood who have their Christmas lights up. And I just think, well, that's fun. It's festive. Why not be festive?
Yeah. Well, and it makes them happy. Like, don't encroach on someone's happiness. If you want to wait for Christmas, if you want to wait until after Thanksgiving, if you like the separation of the holidays, that's great. If you want to get through Thanksgiving before you start celebrating Christmas or any other winter solstice holiday, great. But, don't belittle somebody because they're finding their happiness and they're
Here,
excited for it.
here's the way my grandkids put it. Don't yuck on someone else's yum.
There we go. I like that.
Don't yuck
Wise
on their yum.
wise words from your grandkids.
Yeah.
Don't yuck on someone else's yums.
But if you think traditionally about the idea of holidays around this time of year goes back certainly hundreds of years, maybe,
Hmm.
certainly more than that, that as it gets darker
Hmm.
this time of year, then the idea of lights or candles, originally
Mm.
candles or fires are really important to people. And I think it's just a continuation of that tradition to put the lights up. And so the lights turn on, we just went into, I don't know, do we go to daylight savings or whatever,
It ended, I think.
the clock's changed.
Yeah.
And so it gets darker and it's nice to have, I, I come home in the dark after work and I really like the lights. So
Hmm. Yeah.
I like it when people do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun and find joy where you can. And if the
Yeah,
Christmas lights make somebody
that's
happy,
right.
then, let them be happy.
I agree.
So for some people, they're going to feel that stress. The holidays are not enjoyable. And I think a lot of it comes down to a lack of boundaries.
It's my favorite word. So when I read the outline for tonight, I thought, yeah, but I think that's right.
Yeah.
It's the inability to say no or
Hmm.
think about expectations and then,
Yeah.
set boundaries around what your expectations are.
Hmm.
And so if you think of where you can set boundaries, certainly with gatherings,
Yep.
so parties, either with friends or family, work often has that, money, so
Yep.
spending money. I think that's one of the things that for a lot of people they don't like about the holidays. It becomes very materialistic.
Yeah.
And, we can talk more about that later as a way to relieve stress. I think it's really important to figure out, how much you can spend, how much you want to spend,
Hmm.
but then really focus on finding the joy in something else, like, or finding meaning in doing something else
Yeah.
and activities usually.
Where do you want your emphasis to be? Like, right?
Yeah.
So really think about it. What do you enjoy about this time of year?
Hmm.
I mean, whether it's the hot chocolate or the extra time with the family, or, maybe you enjoy the break from school if you're a teacher,
Uh-huh.
whatever joy you find in this holiday, make it about that and prioritize that and, lean into that. But I think one of the biggest things that's going to help people who find themselves really stressed this time of year is to just schedule. So, maybe you go through and you find, okay, these are my big events. These are my can't miss. These are my must have deadlines, right? Maybe it's a kid's play at school that you need to attend, or it's this big work party that is really important, whatever it is. So plan those out. And from there, schedule in, you can say to your spouse, okay, I would like to do X amount of activities and then kind of negotiate from there. But really, it just comes down to planning ahead, right? And start now. I mean, it seems kind of early, but I mean, Thanksgiving is 1 week away, folks.
Right. I don't know that it is early. I mean, Lindy has like this has gone on for maybe 5 years to try and get all the gift giving done by the 1st of December.
Hmm.
And I always thought, well, that's a lot of work. But really, what happens is it makes the rest of the month fairly stress free. What
Hmm.
I was thinking about planning, though, I mean, we often talk about a typical family, parents and kids, and there are many different ways to have a family, friends,
Hmm.
single parents, people who aren't attached to anyone, don't have kids. I think that the important thing is whatever the configuration you find yourself in. So if it's what that traditional family is, I think you need to talk about it. And I think the
Yeah.
mistake that a lot of people make is they don't talk about what does this look like. And so I do see clients where it's almost like the holidays are controlling them, or the
Mm.
whatever the events are controlling them, And when they talk about it, it feels like they don't have any control. They can't say no.
Yeah.
And I think that that's often true for people, especially with family. They feel like they can't say no to family, but you
Right.
absolutely can say no to family.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to say no to family, and it's okay, but
Mhm.
you need to talk about it first. And I think now is the best time to start talking about it.
Yeah, and acknowledge, I think, your spouse's concerns or your spouse's feelings about it.
Right.
Maybe the reason why you want to say no to this party is because you struggle with your relationship with your in-laws, right? And
Hmm.
so, you need to acknowledge both sides. So, on the one hand, like, let's say if Curtis really didn't want to go to a Christmas party with my parents because I don't know, he had some sort of strained relationship somewhere, right?
Hmm.
Then, we would both need to acknowledge that. I would need to acknowledge this is important to me. And I also need to acknowledge to him why he doesn't want to go. So again, it's about that conversation. It's about the dialogue. And not that we have that problem because, I mean, we're not going to any Christmas party with my parents because they live like 10 states away.
Hmm.
But just to give an example, right? And so I think really it's just about having that dialogue and just validating and having the conversation and doing it now before it's like, hey, we've got that party next week that we need to go to. And I think, and that's another thing too that I think is important to bring up and why it's so important to plan. So I'm the type of person you can tell me, hey, we've got this party tomorrow. And if I can genuinely make it work with my schedule, I'll go. I'll do it.
Uh-huh.
But if you
Yeah.
tell Curtis that, he's gonna bulk. He's gonna be like, wait, 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 wait. You want to do what?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And try not to do that. Like, don't throw things on people last minute if not everyone's going to appreciate that.
Right. But and going back to what you said about, if one person has trouble going to another person's family
Yeah.
party, I
Mhm.
think certainly the dialogue and having the process of understanding each other's position is important. But I also think you can throw out possible solutions, like what can we
Yeah.
do differently, or what can we do that, would make it a little bit easier. So it's not necessarily that you would say, okay, I'm not going to go, or we aren't going to go. I think you can also explore the possibilities of what can we do that's going to make this more okay. I don't know that it'll ever be
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
but more okay. And so talking about possible solutions, I think, is always helpful for the person because then they feel like, one, you heard that it was hard. Two, you're really willing to be somewhat flexible as
Hmm.
to what this looks like because it's important to both of you. One, that they don't get stuck too long with the other family, and the other, that they want to be with their
Yeah. And so, kind of this fake scenario that I brought up brings up a really good point. And that's when you have extended family that you don't get along with and how you deal with that and how you handle that. And this goes back to boundaries. So I saw this one, it was this meme on Facebook, and it was like something about how to get through the holidays.
family.
And the last tip was if anybody makes a comment about your weight, eat them. And so I thought, oh, that's one way to cope. I don't know if that's an
Hmm.
effective
Yeah,
coping strategy, but and
right.
so I thought that would be good to talk about. What do you do when you have that family member who just doesn't know that the comment they're making is inappropriate or hurtful? And that's a boundary. And that can be really hard to deal with, but maybe you have that family member that just doesn't get it. They don't get that, hey, I don't appreciate you making comments about my weight or about my job or about my lifestyle. Like, just leave me alone and let me enjoy this meal. How do you
Well,
deal with that?
it's a really good question. I think it probably would require more time than what we're going to give it tonight. But I think in simple terms, you decide what are your options.
Hmm.
So I can say something to the person. I can, which would be a confrontation. I cannot say anything and let it go. If I know they're going to make a hard comment, then I could not attend. I could choose not to go.
Hmm.
I mean, so you have these options and you weigh all the options and realize that there are always unintended consequences to every behavior that we make.
Yep.
And so if
Yep.
you were to say choose the confrontation route, which means you go up and you say, I don't appreciate it when you make these comments, and please don't do that in the future. You have no idea what the response is going to be, nor do you have any idea how that might affect the rest of the family if you're in this
Yeah.
larger
Yeah.
family group. So I think realizing that you do have options, I think it's important to feel like you have some power, because
Hmm.
often when someone makes the comment to you, it's almost like, they're throwing out this zinger and we don't have any power to do anything. We just have to take it. I
Yeah.
don't think that's true. I think we can choose our response.
Hmm.
And you can also choose a response of no response.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about it, that's also a response, and that's a valid response. It's up to the person, but I think making a conscious choice, because if you're around family, you probably know that your aunt or your uncle is probably going to make some sort of comment. I mean, you've been
Hmm.
around them enough that you know what's going to happen. Plan for it. So just like
Yeah.
so plan for, what are we going to do when Uncle so and so says this? What shall we
Hmm.
do?
What are we gonna
Um,
do when Uncle so and so has had too much to drink?
right,
What's our game plan for that? Because
right,
I mean, that's
right.
another problem, and that might even just be something to take in consideration to say, okay, this person exhibits this behavior when they've had too much to drink, and just be
Mhm,
ready for that. And maybe that makes it a little bit easier to accept, or maybe a little easier to ignore. But, going back to what you said about confronting, I think
mhm,
that that could be a very valid option. It's just really important to do it in the right way, in that
mhm.
maybe don't do it in front of everybody.
Well, see, that's the reason to plan, right?
Yes.
Because if
Yeah.
you don't think about it, then it's going to happen more spur of the moment, and it's likely that you're going to flare up and be
Yeah.
big, and you're going to do it in front of the rest of the family. But what if you thought about it and you anticipated? I really like the idea of anticipating events that are going to happen, and if you anticipate it and then think to yourself, okay, here's how I'll handle it,
Hmm.
then you're going to be calmer
Yeah.
about it, because you've already, it's up there in your frontal lobe. You've already decided this might happen. Here's what I'm going to do. It gives you more control
Yes.
over the situation. Whereas, just exploding
Hmm.
and having all that physiological reaction to the
Yeah.
bad comment, you don't feel in control typically.
Hmm. Yeah. And so again, if you can mentally prepare yourself
Hmm.
for this person's behavior,
Yeah.
then you can, temper your reaction and then find a quiet moment and talk to them,
Right.
one on one is
Right.
really the best place. And use that soft startup technique that
Hmm.
Gottman's talked about of, hey, I don't appreciate this, or, you said this and I didn't like the way you said that, or I don't like this behavior.
Hmm.
Could we change this behavior?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
that will
Yeah.
probably result in a positive outcome for
Yeah.
everybody.
I think most of the time it will, but you brought up a really good point. If there's alcohol involved, and
Yeah.
there's alcohol involved, I think you have to be very careful about confrontation.
Wait until they sober up.
Yeah, but what you have to decide is, if
Yeah.
you're at a party and that happens and there's alcohol involved, what do you do? Do you leave? I mean, I've talked to a young couple who has that problem with extended
Hmm.
family, and
Yeah.
so they've just let the parents know, if this behavior happens, then we'll just quietly get up and leave. We aren't going to stay if
Hmm.
this behavior continues. And if you let everybody know, then they understand why you're leaving,
Yeah.
and it becomes a consequence to someone else's behavior.
Yeah. And that's a very, very healthy boundary and a very
Hmm.
healthy way to set a boundary, because you set the boundary ahead of time. You've said, hey, I don't appreciate this behavior. If this behavior happens, we don't want to make a scene. Like, we still love you. We want to participate in this family event, but this behavior is not something we're comfortable with. And so we'll excuse ourselves and go home. And so I
Yeah.
think that's a very healthy, great way to
Hmm.
set a boundary. So, speaking of boundaries, let's talk about the monetary boundary. And I fall into that category of, sometimes I just get, I guess, frustrated or just fed up with the consumerism around the
Yeah.
holidays. And
Yeah.
I
It's
felt
hard.
that, yeah, and I felt that even more working in retail. And I'm like, they're sending us so much stuff, right? Like it just, and it feels so consumer, and it's like, what is the true meaning of Christmas, that kind of thing, or what is the true meaning of the holiday? And to combat that, what I personally do is I try to involve my kids in that. And so one tradition that we've started that I've really enjoyed is we've let our kids shop for each other. So it's like a kid gift exchange.
Uh huh.
And that personally helps me because, then they're being thoughtful about what would this person like, and they're being thoughtful in their gift giving. And so really just if you struggle with that, find a way to make it not about consumerism, right? There's other things you can do. Maybe you do a family service project. So you say, this year for Christmas, we're going to do something nice for another family,
Yeah.
right? Or, we're going to do something that isn't monetary and make it, just whatever works for you. Find a way to, I guess, kind of change the narrative and
Hmm.
make it more enjoyable.
Right. And so that again takes planning.
Hmm.
Certainly, it just goes back to let's talk about what as a family we want this Christmas or this holiday season to look like. And I think involving service or giving or doing for others
Hmm.
really helps you go back to maybe the fundamentals of what the season's about. And so you're right. It is really easy to get caught up in the consumerism part of it.
Yeah.
And I think we would all be happier if
Hmm.
that changed and it wasn't quite as intense or,
Yeah.
the expectations are so many presents.
Yeah.
And that's hard for me. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah, and and some people they love that aspect. I mean, because some
Hmm.
people gift giving is a primary love language, and so for them,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
holidays is they genuinely enjoyed that, and that's okay, and that's great. But I mean, if you think about even somebody who enjoys the holidays and somebody whose primary love language is gift giving, really what it comes down to is it's about the thought. So when it comes to
Hmm.
gifts for them, what they're concerned about is the thought you put into the gift. Did this person buy something thinking of me? And so
Yeah.
again, it still goes back to that relationship, right? And to
Hmm.
having a connection. And I think, that's the most important part of the holidays for me is family, right? Like it's all about my family and being close to family. And, I personally love the holiday parties. I love the family get-togethers and, having everybody gather around and enjoy a meal and just hanging out. And, I enjoy that. And that to me is what, the season is all about is just the togetherness. And that's what I love about Thanksgiving. And then, we have a lot of fun Christmas traditions that we do. And this also leads really well into the next point, and that's managing your expectations. And
Hmm.
again, expectations is a boundary of, you can kind of set that expectation. I think we talked about that, like maybe a behavior that is or isn't acceptable, right? But another part of managing your expectations is I've definitely had that build up where I've been excited for something and then it turns out to be a complete letdown for
Hmm.
whatever reason. And I think a lot of people feel that, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people deal with that.
Yeah.
And so that's just maybe something to be mindful of, to just prepare for the worst and hope for the best,
Well,
right?
and have realistic expectations,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think sometimes you're right, we inflate those expectations. Oh, this is going to be so great, and then it's not. So I think it's really important to really talk about what it is you want out of the season
Yeah.
and to be mindful. It's all about being mindful
Hmm.
about what you're wanting. Because otherwise, if you don't have an idea of what you want, chances are you aren't going to get it.
Yeah. And, I mean, there's also the old adage, if you expect nothing at all, then
Um,
everything goes great. So if you
yeah.
go in, and not that you should just have no expectations, but, I guess it's just manage your expectations, because if you go into it not expecting much, then you're going to have a great time regardless.
Well, that's true. That's true. You're right.
Anyways, I think keep in mind that we're human beings. And so, if you go into this hoping to spend time with family, well, maybe that family is going to involve some conflict because
Hmm.
again, it's family and we're human beings and I
Right.
feel like it's inevitable. And so, just prepare yourself mentally for that and be okay with it. So our aunt and uncle had this big fight during Christmas dinner. Well, there was still other things that were fun, or right, it's like, I guess, try to focus more on the positive. If you can
Hmm.
focus more on the positive, then
Yeah.
in general, in life, you're going to be happier. If you're just
Hmm.
constantly focusing on the negative, then, well, that's what your life is going to be, is just negative.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about downtime and self-care during,
Healthcare, it's so important.
yes, and it gets neglected during the holidays. And
It does. And I was thinking, it certainly, we'll talk more about how to do that as adults. As parents, you need to be in charge of the self care of your children
yeah,
because they aren't going to do it. And
yeah,
so, meaning, I think watching what they consume as
yeah,
far as,
yeah,
watching what they consume and how much sleep they get.
yeah, yep,
And so, before we go into self care for adults, parents, really, you can control your children during this time, and
yep,
things will go better if you do. If
yeah,
they don't have so much sugar, and if they are a little more well rested than they might
yeah.
normally be.
And not that you can't let them enjoy extra sweets, or
Right,
let them have
right,
a late night, right? I
right.
mean, I think that,
But but if you've got in the holiday vacation from school, if every night is a late night, that's going to catch up to you.
it is. Yeah.
By
Yeah.
the time you come around to New Year's, everybody's, pulling their hair out because they haven't had enough sleep.
Yeah,
So,
and they're
so I
overscheduled.
think yes, it's about being flexible.
Yeah.
Not rigid. I am not suggesting
Yeah.
rigidity.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting flexibility, but being mindful
Mhm.
about it,
Yeah.
so that if your kids are going late night 3 nights in a row,
Mhm.
there will be consequences for that.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
you get to decide. The theme that's coming out, I mean, it seems like we always have a theme, or at least I try
Mhm.
and find a theme. It's planning. Because
Yeah.
if you plan ahead, you can say, okay, this is going to be a late night. You know, you can plan for your kids as well.
Yeah, so this is gonna be late night. Maybe the
Right.
next day we have a down day,
Right.
and
Right.
so we can regain equilibrium. And for some families, rigidity is just what works best for them. And that goes back to a boundary. I mean, I'm thinking of a good friend in particular who has kids who struggle with anxiety. And
Hmm.
so their coping mechanism is a rigid schedule, because that
What?
structure works for them.
Right. But I think, with a mental health issue like anxiety, that makes sense to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah,
But many families don't have that.
it's
And so
true. Yeah.
they don't need to be rigid. But sometimes I agree with you. Sometimes rigidity can be the thing that
hmm
really helps.
And that's okay. And so again, it goes back to that boundary of, if you know that you have a kid who struggles with anxiety, or maybe you have a kid who just does not cope without enough sleep, and
Hmm.
it's going to be a little reign of terror. Again, set that boundary, and you can tell your family, well, I'm sorry, that's going to cut too late into so and so's bedtime, and it's just not going to work for our family. Or maybe just one of you goes, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you go and you
Right.
leave early, right? And
Right.
so, you
There
know,
are all sorts of options. But
yeah.
again, it's better to plan for it and talk about it,
hmm
like what's going to work.
Yeah.
But for self care for adults, I think,
hmm
it's those standard things: sleep, exercise, and eating well,
Yeah.
and having some downtime away from doing something for,
hmm
that you aren't always on the go. If you're always
Right.
on the go, I don't know many people who can do that for a whole month.
Yeah.
Really tough.
If you don't take time to rest, you're going to make time to be sick.
Yeah.
I
Right.
feel like I did that last year. I don't know. Maybe this wasn't intentional, or maybe it was my body's way of saying slow down. But
Hmm.
I had an infection, the flu, and appendicitis. So two infections within 1 week. And I
Hmm.
tell you what, I spent a full 2 weeks recovering from, I mean, a part of it is I had surgery, but I was literally forced during one of the busiest times of the holidays. I mean, this was the Monday after Thanksgiving that I got appendicitis. And,
Yeah.
I had to take a 2 full weeks and just rest. And I didn't have an option. And, not that you're going to get appendicitis, right, if you don't take time to rest, but it's just that idea of, I almost wonder if it was my body's way of saying, you're too busy. You need to
Hmm.
slow, like my body's way of forcing me to just slow down and
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. So I think self-care
Hmm.
is certainly one of the things that a lot of adults tend to neglect.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big mistake.
Hmm.
Going back, the really pay attention to your healthcare. I think
Yeah.
that might be the other thing, or self-care. I keep
Hmm.
calling it healthcare.
I
But
mean, they might as well be the same thing.
yeah, do not neglect your self-care. I think for adults that is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Huge mistake.
It's also a huge mistake to neglect your health care,
That's
but
true. Right.
but yes, I mean, with the self-care, and I want to make this distinction again because it came up with a friend who I was talking to who has been struggling. I mean, she's got young kids, and so she was struggling with just feeling overwhelmed. We both kind of were. And both of us have found a really great exercise routine that we enjoy. And, that was part of it. And exercise is important. But I want to just stress the difference between self care and self maintenance. And we did an entire episode recently on self care. And so exercise can be self care, but it is not just self care. Like exercise should not, and maybe for some people it can be. But I said to her, I'm like, exercise is not self care any more than taking a shower is self care. I need a shower. I have to take a
Hmm.
shower. That doesn't make it
Hmm.
self care. I need to exercise. It's good for me, but that doesn't necessarily make it self care. It can be the same way that
Uh-huh.
taking a bath can be self care. And if,
Yeah.
exercise can be self care, but, for some people, you need to separate the two.
Hmm. But don't
And
neglect it. Don't neglect yourself because
yeah,
you're going to get sick. You're going to get tired. You'll be cranky at the
yep,
family dinner and
yeah,
much more likely to have conflict with
yep,
the uncle who might be drinking too much.
yep.
And so it's just an all around good strategy to take care of yourself.
Yes. Don't neglect your self care.
As we end the podcast, it is okay to say no to families. It
Yes,
is okay to say no to your parents
yes.
as adults. I'm talking about it,
Yeah,
we adults.
yeah, yes, yes.
I don't know that we have many kid listeners, but as adults, it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
Again, as we've said many times, it really matters how you say no. You know
Uh-huh.
what your process looks like,
Yeah,
and you can say no in a harsh way, and you can say no in a soft way.
yeah,
And so I would suggest you choose the soft way.
yeah.
Just be aware that you have a choice in how you say it, but don't get caught in that trap of thinking I have to do what my parents want.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
as parents, for many parents, they're always going to want more,
right. Yeah,
and but you do not have to give them more.
right. And it's not necessarily that it's always coming from a bad place, right? I mean,
I don't think it's coming from a bad place. I think it's
yeah,
coming from we want to be with you, we want to
yep,
enjoy, but that does not mean it's going to be the best thing for you.
yes,
Yeah,
for your
I don't think it's a comes from a bad place. I would never
yeah,
think that.
yeah,
But I just think it's okay to say no to family.
yes. And it's
There's your takeaway, listeners.
yes, it's okay to say no. And a lot of it probably stems from if you have kids. I mean, that's
Hmm.
all grandparents want is to spend more time with those grandkids, which is a fantastic thing. But again, you can say no. You can
Yes.
say,
Yeah.
no, my kids have had too much. They're
Hmm.
done and
Yep.
they need a break. And again, maybe you look for that alternative solution, such as, well, this day isn't going to work, but tomorrow is a calmer day. Why don't you come
Yeah.
over
Yes.
for a little bit in the afternoon? Right. So I think that can be
That,
really
you're right.
helpful too.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the takeaways again: planning.
Yep.
Talk about it before, and this is going to drop probably after Thanksgiving or some.
The
This
week before.
episode we're recording before Thanksgiving. It is not too early
No.
to do this. I think the more time, the holiday season really starts with Halloween, which is crazy, but I think it
Yeah.
does. And
Well,
so,
for some people, it starts before that. I mean,
yeah.
it started for me. I mean, we had all of these fall parties and Halloween
Hmm.
parties, and a
Yeah.
lot of people like to go to pumpkin patches, and it
Hmm.
really starts in October,
Yeah.
mid-October.
So planning,
Mhm.
And it's okay to say no.
Yep. Plan to say no.
Plan to say no. There you go.
All right, there we go. That's the big takeaway. Okay, so next week we're going to get into conflict resolution, and not so spoiler alert, it's not about the dishes.
Yeah.
So
It's not about the dishes.
yeah, it's been a while since we've revisited this subject, and I found a funny video online that ties in really nicely with conflict resolution and the process. It's going to be all about process because that is really important. And we can't talk about conflict without talking about Gottman. So,
Right.
all
Okay.
good things to look forward to next week. And in the meantime, we will see you all then.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. Have a question for Dr. Burton? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com. This podcast was produced and edited by Liz Lang. Music is by Audio Lounge.